Our speaker or resource person today is the president of Rothwell and Associates, a distinguished professor of Penn State University, our HR organization development guru, our esteemed mentor, Dr. William Rothwell. Good morning, sir.
Talent management and succession planning during the pandemic that we are all facing globally. And you can see my email contact information on this slide.
Yes.
If you'd like to reach out to me at some future time. You can also see my many credentials in the HR field, and that certification is becoming increasingly important. I'm an SPHR, which means a senior professional in human resources. I'm a SHRM SCP, that means a senior certified professional. I'm an RODC, which means a registered organization development consultant. And I'm also a CPLP fellow, which stands for, in ATD's language, a certified professional in learning and performance.
Wow.
So ATD is changing their certification, and it will in the future be a certified talent development professional. So the language changes as our field changes. Could you change to the next slide, please? So in my objectives, every good trainer has targets. I have a few targets for today. I'd like to share with you, what do we mean by the terms talent management and succession planning?
Right.
And both of those terms communicate certain things, and we'll also talk about some of the models that help us develop and implement talent or succession programs.
Okay.
So every best practice organization that has a world-class talent or succession program has a model to drive that program, a strategic model. So I will share my models of talent management and succession, and then you pose some questions for me about talent management and succession, and I'll be happy to answer those. Next slide. So I published many books, as you mentioned early on in the conversation, and some of these books are very relevant to today's talk. My most famous book of the 127 books that I have published,
Wow,
in English, and also that includes all the translations into other languages such as Chinese, Vietnamese, Thai, Korean, Russian, Portuguese, Spanish, and many other languages. My most famous book is Effective Succession Planning.
Yes.
wow.
Currently in a 5th edition, and underneath it you will see another book, The Leader's Daily Role in Talent Management. And the difference between those two books is important. The Effective Succession Planning is about what the company should do to establish an appropriate HR policy framework to support talent management and succession planning. But the other book, The Leader's Daily Role, is what each manager should do to help implement that talent or succession program.
Okay.
So it is not good enough to have once a year talent review meetings and then forget talent development. We need to turn it into daily practice. And to do that, the HR department has a role. Each manager at every level has a role. And each worker has a role. And we'll get to that because I also wrote a book about career planning and succession management.
Okay.
And the company does succession planning, but the person does career planning. So succession planning is top down, career planning is bottom up, and we can link the two together.
Okay.
I also wrote a book, Lean but Agile, and that's quite relevant because I find that a lot of times senior leaders, when they hear that they are losing their best people to retirement or to resignation, they tend to clutch their hearts and say, oh my God, I have only two choices, promote from within or recruit from outside. And I don't like either choice. Because if I promote from within, do I have someone who is qualified? And if I try to recruit from outside, how long will it take me to find someone?
Yes.
And how will I be sure that they will work out and that they will be successful? So I've also published many other books. We don't need to talk about these. Please turn to the next slide.
Wow.
These are the books that are the most recent that I've published. The Essential HR Guide and Increasing Learning and Development's Impact are year 2020 books. They just came out. And I'm working on a book right now about succession planning in small business.
Interesting.
And in family businesses. Those are unique areas. I've also published on government succession planning and government talent management. And that is a bit different from corporate or business related succession. Turn the slide, please.
I'm interested, Dr. Bill, with your book, Winning the Talent War Through Neurodiversity. What do you mean by that?
That book is about, as we deal with talent management, we have to be aware that there are certain labor groups that we have historically underused. As we have talent shortages, we have to consider using groups that we have overlooked. So on the previous slide, there was a book, Working Longer. That book was about dealing with retirees, using retirees to address our short-term talent requirements. And if you turn to the next slide, neurodiversity is about people with disabilities. And there are two kinds of disabilities. One disability we see when we think of the disabled, we usually think of people in wheelchairs.
Right.
That's actually a very small percentage. There is a much bigger group of people who have brain disorders, neurological conditions like autism, like dyslexia, or like the 600 documented learning disabilities. There are 600 documented learning disabilities. These are problems with the wiring in our brains. And this is important because 5% of the entire world's population has invisible disabilities that affects their job performance. 5%. 5% of 7 billion people is 300 million people.
Wow.
That's
quite big.
bigger than the population of the Philippines.
Yes.
That is nearly the size of the US population. And this is a group that we have traditionally underemployed.
Okay.
Yes.
They have trouble getting jobs. They have trouble keeping jobs because they have difficulty performing the work. And so that's what that book is about, how we can tap and use the skills and talents of people that we have traditionally overlooked. Neurodiversity. Okay, next slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
We go to define. Yes.
We want to define some terms, and I will start right off with several important terms.
Okay, Sir Bill.
And the first term I'll talk about is replacement planning, which is often confused with succession planning.
Yeah.
Replacement planning is disaster planning for human beings. Disaster planning. What do we do if the airplane crashes carrying our CEO?
Yes.
What do we do if our VP of Human Resources is in an automobile accident and is in the hospital for 6 months? How does the work get done in our company? Who are the backups who can fill in for the person while we're trying to deal with day-to-day business problems? So a company cannot exist without a CEO for a year or two.
Right.
We need someone to step in and at least temporarily do the job and make the decisions until we find a suitable replacement. That's replacement planning.
Okay.
So we're not promoting people. We are not transferring people except temporarily. But then we have the time to find the right candidate. How long does it take to find a new CEO? The more senior the position, the longer it often takes. It could take a year to find a CEO. What does the company do while we have no CEO? That's why we need replacement planning. So we pick someone from within the company and we ask them to fill in for their boss while we do a search for a permanent successor.
Okay. So that's the difference, a very clear distinction of replacement planning from succession planning.
That's right. But in succession planning, we are developing people to move up on the organization chart. So we traditionally think of promotions as vertical movements on the organization chart. We move from supervisor to middle manager, or middle manager to senior executive, or senior executive to CEO. So that is the way we traditionally think of promotion. But there's another way to think of promotion that is growing more important. And that is lateral or horizontal promotions. And the way that works is we recognize that some jobs like engineering, like research scientists, are very brain intensive. And they require different levels of expertise. So we can promote you from engineer to supervisor of engineers to manager of engineers to executive in charge of engineers. That's one way to promote people. And we need successors to deal with vertical movements. But we can also have specialized engineers, people who have special knowledge that's different from the other engineers in our company. And we can give people a promotion if they can develop their skills professionally to move from engineer 1 to engineer 2 to engineer 3, and we call those horizontal promotions because we're moving across the organization chart, not up the organization chart. So succession planning recognizes that there is a difference between one level and other levels. There's a difference between a supervisor and a middle manager, between a middle manager and a senior executive. And to get you qualified to be promoted, we must give you the training and the development to prepare you to move up. Succession planning is all about developing talent. Key to succession planning is talent development. If there's no difference between your job and your boss's job, we don't need your boss. So there has to be a difference, or we are adding unnecessary costs to the business. And if there are differences, then that means we need to know what they are and have a way to prepare people to move up. And that's what succession planning is all about, developing people to help them become qualified for promotion.
Okay. Now, when you say developing people, how would that now be different from talent management, succession planning versus talent management?
Well, that's a great question. Development is all about changing your skills and or your competencies, changing them. Talent management, the brief definition of talent management is the process of attracting, developing, and retaining the best people. But succession planning is limited to just developing people for more or different responsibility. So you notice succession planning is included in talent management.
True.
Because the definition I just gave you was talent management is about talent acquisition, talent development, and talent retention.
Yes.
So succession planning is about talent development. So succession planning is included in the definition of talent management. And by the way, we can do other things in talent management in addition to attracting people through recruiting and selection, developing people through training and development, or retaining people. And there are many ways to keep people, but we can add other elements to talent management that go beyond that. For example, talent engagement.
Right.
Yes.
Get people more committed and passionate about the work they do. Talent deployment, which is an area that has come up in my speaking and my consulting. How long do we leave a manager in the same job with no change? That's a talent deployment question. Do we monitor how long people stay in the same position? In big multinational companies, they often have rules about how long you can stay in the same job with no change. Very often, the limit is 7 years maximum. But often they rotate you at the 2-year mark. So you move from one department in one country to maybe a different department in a different country, and that keeps you refreshed and keeps you challenged.
Yes.
New opportunities.
Excited with your job.
Yes. And another issue that we have to be concerned about in talent management is knowledge transfer.
Right, agree.
How we transfer what you have learned, what we call tacit knowledge, from the people who have it to the people who don't have it. And another area that I have been interested in is what we call social relationship succession planning. In some jobs, we hire people not for what they know, but who they know.
Agree.
There are certain jobs, like for example, in sales, right? You need network.
If your best friend is Duterte, then we want to hire you based on who you know.
Agree.
And we can often map the social relationships that are critical to our business. Who are our biggest customers, and which of our employees has the best relationships with them? Who are our key company suppliers, and who has the best relationships? What are the government ministries that most affect our business, and which of our employees have the best relationships with those ministries? You see what I am saying?
Yes.
So we can choose to focus on social relationships, on knowledge transfer, or on attracting, developing, retaining, engaging, and deploying the best people. So these are critical issues in succession and in talent management. It even goes a step further. I did a research study on the definition of the word talent. And I did a global survey of multinational companies, and I asked them how they define the word talent.
Wow, what was the result, Sir Bill?
Very many different definitions. Some people consider talent to mean job performance. Some think talent means promotion potential. Some think talent means both job performance and promotion potential. Some think it means your social relationships, who you know. Something thinks that it means your special knowledge. What is your special technical knowledge in your field of practice? Some people think it means your individual strengths. What do you do best? So there are many possible definitions of the word talent. Why do we care about that? Because we generally cannot spend the money needed to do all of those. So someone must set priorities. What is really important to our company? Which of those definitions of talent are the most important to our business needs? And then that will shape our talent program, because our talent program will look different depending on how we define talent.
Agree. I remember what you said earlier when we had a class during the year. You said everybody can be trained. However, there are only those certain people who are considered talent. And that's where we should invest more.
Right. Well, and that's exactly the issue there, is it's an investment decision. You know, some people believe that we should invest an equal amount of money in all of our employees and to keep their skills current, to help them qualify for promotion, and to maintain their basic skills.
Mm-hmm.
But other people say, well, that's not worth it. That there are some people where if we invest money in them, we will get a much greater payoff because they are more talented. Do we want to spend the same money in developing Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or Jack Welch that we spend on an average employee? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because some superstars are worth more money to us than others, and maybe our investment money should follow the quality of the people. So this is a philosophical question for company leaders to decide. Do they want to spend equal amount of money on everybody and thereby not have to deal with the complaints they will get if some people are treated better than others? Or do they want to invest the money where the payoff will be the best? And that's a very important question to consider. Can you turn to the next slide?
Okay. Here.
So here is a replacement planning chart. You asked me, one of the questions to talk about was, where do we start in launching a talent or succession program? Well, there are many places, many right places where we can begin. And a very common place is with the senior executive team. And we ask, who are the backups? Who are the successors for the CEO and for each of our C-suite executives? That's a very common place to start. But another place to start is with a replacement chart like this. This is called a replacement chart. And again, it goes for planning for emergencies. So you can see that at the top, manager position title, this could refer to any level. That could be the CEO. That could be a VP, a vice president. That could be a department manager. That could be a frontline supervisor. Or that could even be an hourly worker. And their successors and backups might be outside the company. And what we're trying to do with a chart like this is be able to identify the backups in case of an emergency. So let's say our manager walks out the door and gets hit by a car. Who's going to do their job tomorrow?
Right.
And if we don't have an answer for that, then what will happen? I'll tell you what often happens is that their boss is asked to do the boss's job plus the job of the person who is dead or out sick or on disability. And bosses don't like to do two jobs. The CEO does not want to do the job of CEO and Chief Financial Officer, or CEO and VP of Human Resources, or CEO and VP of IT. So we have to have people identified for each manager who might be capable of stepping in and doing the boss's job while we look for a suitable replacement inside the company, outside the company, or we consider other options like restructuring, changing it from 3 senior managers to 2 senior managers and collapsing their divisions together. So this chart is meant as a planning tool that a CEO can pass out to his or her direct reports and say, who's the number 1, number 2, number 3 ranked backup for you? What are their names? And just how ready are they to step in and do your job? So readiness is usually a code.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can have RN, ready now. The person can step in and do their boss's job in a heartbeat. R1 means we could promote them temporarily, but they're going to need coaching and training for about 6 months before they're going to be fully productive in that new job that they are doing temporarily. Or R2, which means the person would require a year of coaching and development to be fully productive. So this chart I have found in my consulting work can often be an excellent starting point. It is not succession planning. This is replacement planning.
Right.
Yeah.
However, managers and the CEO will ask many questions while they try to fill out this chart.
Right.
And as they ask those questions, we are starting to show that there is a need for a better, more sophisticated approach to succession planning and to talent management. And so we're helping our managers move up a learning curve and introduce more sophisticated thinking about talent. So this can be one of those starting points.
Yeah.
Can you shift to the next slide? So I promised to talk about a couple of important models. Here is my model on succession planning that at least 50 multinational companies have adopted, and countless agencies and government around the world. Succession planning, again, is about developing people for more responsibility. So if you answer the questions in this model, you are starting to build an action plan for your company's succession plan. So the first question is, what are the goals you want out of this program? Why do we want succession planning? Very often there are 2 major reasons. There are others, but there are 2 major ones. The first one is we expect a lot of retirements at the senior executive level. Around the world, baby boomers like me are at retirement age. And as they leave the organizations, they need successors.
Yes.
Where do the successors come from? Well, generally, we've got a couple of choices. We promote from within, or we hire from outside.
Right.
This model focuses on that internal promotion. So then we ask, what are the roles? Who should do what? What should the HR department do to contribute to succession planning? What should the CEO do? What should each manager do? And then accountabilities means, how do we make them do it? How do we hold them accountable to carry out their role? So 70% of all succession programs fail within the first 3 years. 70% fail. A lot of companies today, though, are very interested in replacement planning and succession planning because of the pandemic. they are worried that they might suddenly lose their CEO to the virus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Might suddenly lose their senior executives or middle managers or frontline supervisors to the virus. And so many companies are asking, should we update our succession plan in light of the pandemic?
Mm.
And that has driven a lot of interest worldwide in updating companies' succession plans. So back to the model. The first question we ask after the first one is present work and workforce requirements.
Mhm.
There, what we're saying is, how do we define talent?
Mm.
Do we have up-to-date job descriptions? Do we have up-to-date competency models that describe the people we need for each level on the organization chart and each silo on the organization chart? The next question is about performance management. How are we checking that people are carrying out their jobs? And how do we know people are demonstrating the important competencies that are needed for job success? So how are work and workforce requirements evaluated refers to performance reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Are they aligned with our job descriptions and competency models? Then the next question is about the future. The skills you need now will not be the same in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
How do we plan for the changes in talent requirements? And we might have to forecast, what will job descriptions look like in 3 years? What will our competencies need to be in 3 years to achieve our strategic goals, our company goals? And then we get into probably one of the most important questions in succession planning and talent management, which is potential evaluation. How do we know you could do your boss's job?
Yes. Mm.
How do we know that you have promotion potential?
Mm-hmm.
So I've done much research on that question.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, most companies, 60% of all companies worldwide, assume that if you do your job well, you are guaranteed to do your boss's job well.
True.
That's a normal thinking.
That is wrong. That is wrong, because your boss's job is different from your job.
Mm-hmm.
And if your boss's job isn't different, we don't need your boss. So how do we assess you in an objective way to determine whether you are promotion ready?
Mm-hmm.
So I call that thinking promotion assessment.
Mm.
And again, it's different from performance reviews. We're doing a promotion review.
Mm-hmm.
We're comparing you not against the requirements of your current job description, but against the requirements of the job description at your boss's level.
Mm-hmm.
That's different.
Mm.
And often the challenge is, how do we know you could do your boss's job if we have never seen you do it?
Yeah.
So do we assume that you will do a good job at your boss's level if you do a good job at your level? The answer is no. That leads to something we call the Peter Principle.
Mm-hmm.
The Peter Principle is a book title.
Oh. Okay.
The Peter Principle states that we give promotions as rewards for loyalty. But once you are promoted, then we can find out you can't do the job.
Right.
That's the sad reality.
You're not qualified to do the job.
So promotions should not be rewards. When we fill a position, we should be filling it with the best qualified person.
Right.
True. I agree.
That means we have to have a way to compare you to the requirements at your boss's level on the organization chart. That's why it is important to have up-to-date job descriptions and up-to-date competency models. A job description describes the work you do. A competency model describes the human being who does that work well. The type of human being we might need in the Philippines may be somewhat different from the type of person we need in the US.
Yeah.
Right.
Or the type of person we might need in China.
Yes.
So, by the way, I forgot to mention, and you might know it, my wife is Filipino.
Yes.
We know.
I know she's from Bulacan.
That's correct. Yes, Meg Hawaiian. You are right. So she's still sleeping, and it is 8 a.m. here. But I am working hard talking to you. Some would say that's the way it should be. The men should work hard and the ladies should relax. So anyway, back to the model.
Traditions, probably in the past.
So back to the model. That question of how do we assess potential, there are many ways to do it according to my research. But 90% of the companies that do potential reviews rely on your boss's opinion of your promotion potential.
Oh.
90%. I think that is a problem.
Yes.
Because what if your boss doesn't like you?
You're doomed.
You're doomed. And that does not speak to your ability to do the job. It speaks to your personality.
Yes.
And so this is one of the things we have to learn is the company's needs are different from the manager's needs. So the manager may hate you, but if you are a very productive, talented person, you should be considered for promotion.
Yeah.
So we have to have objective ways to assess potential. There are many approaches to do it. Assessment centers is one of those. But increasingly, we are looking for approaches that are more practical. But assessment centers are expensive.
Yes.
360-degree assessments, which is another way, are also expensive.
True.
So what are less expensive ways to determine that someone has promotion potential? And there are some approaches, they are not rigorous, but they are practical.
Okay.
So I could do a whole session just on that question.
Wow.
Then I'm going to move on to the next box, which is
Bill.
so the next box is about talent development. How do we get people developed to move from one level to higher levels on the organization chart? Or how do we get people prepared to move from one level of technical knowledge and expertise to a different, higher level of technical knowledge and technical expertise? So then, in the difference between succession planning and talent management is that we add boxes. So in this model, of talent management, we've added 2 new boxes
Yes.
on top of succession planning. One of those has to do with talent recruitment, which we sometimes today call talent acquisition.
Right.
Yes.
And that means, where do we find people to do the work? We can look outside the company, but we can also do talent acquisition inside the company through job posting, through manager nominations, through other methods. So we have to make sure that we are looking for talent both inside and outside the business. So we add that box to this model to make it talent management. Another box we add is talent retention. And my research shows that that is the weakest link in talent programs.
Why?
Why? It's simple, I think. The reason it's weak is that many companies, many large companies, have a recruiting group, a team of recruiters, and we can focus our attention on talent acquisition on the recruiting group. And many companies have a learning and development function, and we can focus learning and development on the talent development group. But what group is in charge of talent retention? Most companies don't have a talent retention group.
But in some companies, Dr. Bill, it's actually the job of the organization development
or employee
relations.
So talent retention is an often overlooked area.
Yeah.
And I've done research on this topic, and I found 100 best practices in employee retention. And most companies only do about 20% of those talent retention practices. So the key is that each company should have a talent retention strategy, a written plan about how they will identify the talent they want to keep and what they will do to keep that talent.
Right.
So unfortunately, there are many misconceptions about talent retention. For example, HR people often think that our turnover is high because managers mistreat the workers. You've heard the saying, you quit your boss, not your job.
Yes.
And that there is truth to that. But line managers, operating managers, read the summary of exit interviews coming from resigning workers, and workers usually say that they're leaving the company for a better paying job.
Yeah.
And the manager reads that and says, well, it's HR's fault that everybody is resigning because our pay system is not competitive. And so there's a lot of finger pointing. Managers point fingers at HR and blame the pay system for the turnover. And HR people point a finger at line managers and talk about the way they treat people in their departments. Finger pointing does not solve problems.
Yes.
So we need to have a plan. And HR and all the managers need to sit down and craft that plan and then use it. And the last step on this model, the last question is, how do we evaluate our overall talent or succession program?
How?
How do we evaluate? We're not looking at one box in this model. We're looking at how do we grade the results of all the boxes?
Okay.
And the answer is, and I often get the question from skeptical CEOs, they will say, well, professor, what's the return on investment for succession planning? What is the return on investment
They would
for
normally ask
management? They will ask that question. And I did a research study where I interviewed CEOs of very famous companies, and I got them on the telephone and I asked them, how do you grade the quality of your succession program? And the results were very interesting. None of them mentioned ROI. None of them brought up ROI. Return on investment usually means the cost benefit analysis. How much did the succession or talent program cost us, and what benefits did we get, and was there a positive gain? The benefits outweighed the costs.
Right.
That's not the way you grade a succession or talent program. The key to a good talent program is the time to fill metric. How long does it take to fill positions? It costs you money. You don't see the money, but it costs you money to leave vacancies unfilled.
Right.
Yes.
If your CEO job is open and not filled, and you don't have a replacement, it is costing you money because the company may be going downhill. And what is the cost of that to the shareholders and the owners? A lot. So it may be difficult to put price tags to the cost of that. But we often look at the time to fill metric. How long does it take to fill vacancies? And if we have a succession plan or a talent program, the time to fill should be less time than it is if we have no such plan. So in the US government calculates the average time to fill all positions in the United States. We know that for some jobs, it takes longer to fill them than others.
Yes.
You could fill a janitor job overnight. How long will it take you to find a well-qualified CEO? It might take you a year.
Yes.
Right.
What's happening to the company while you're looking for someone? Or we lose our VP of IT. How long does it take to find a well-qualified replacement? You have to look around for that. It could take too long. And so this is a frequent complaint we hear from managers, is that it's taking too long to fill positions.
True.
Do you know in your company how long it takes to fill positions? In the United States, we know the average time to fill all positions is 51 work days. 51 work days.
51 work days.
That's a long time.
Yes.
That's a long time. And what is happening to the work while you're trying to fill the positions? Are you driving up overtime? Are you loading more work on your existing workers? Are you disappointing your customers because orders are not being filled quickly? What are the real costs of a vacancy? And then we have to spend money on recruiting and selecting and onboarding and all those other issues associated with the time it takes to fill a position. This is why time is so important. Shift to the next slide.
Oh, here are the questions.
Here's a question you asked me, and I will I'm near the end of my talk, and I will go through and answer these. So I think I've described the difference. Succession planning is literally talent development.
Yes.
We're developing people to prepare them to be promoted, whether we consider promotion up the organization chart
Mhm.
to more responsibility or across the organization chart with more technical knowledge.
Yes.
Number two, and talent management is the process of attracting, developing, and retaining talent.
Yes.
But talent has many meanings, and we must be clear what it means.
Yeah.
How do we manage talent more proactively during the pandemic and beyond? We're moving to what is now called the agile workforce.
Mhm.
I wrote a book about that, and it was on one of the book covers, Lean but Agile, Rethink Workforce Planning. And it's about thinking not about filling positions, but about how do we get the work of our company done? How do we complete the work? There are many ways to get work done without filling jobs. We can outsource our work, we can offshore our work, we can automate our work, we can hire temps to do the work, we can take pieces of our work and send it out to other companies. There are many ways we can get work accomplished, and we call all of those approaches the agile workforce. That's the trend of the future, is to focus not on filling jobs or vacancies, but rather on what we need to do to get the work done.
Yeah.
What do we need to do? And my book lists 100 ways we could get the work done without hiring anybody and without promoting anyone. 100 ways we could get the
100
work.
ways. Wow.
Wow.
100 different ways to get the work done. So I just had a request from my partner in China to write an online workshop on strategic workforce planning. So the Chinese are very interested in my thinking about the agile workforce. So now we move on to question 3. For those who've not yet started with succession planning, how do they start with it right now? I would recommend replacement planning.
Okay.
And I gave you a chart. The reason to start with that is that the virus creates higher risk that we might lose key people,
Yes.
or the job holders in key positions. So we must plan for emergencies.
True.
And it is not wasted effort, because as we go through replacement planning, the managers will ask a lot of questions, and those questions will build management's knowledge about talent-related issues. So I've learned that from my consulting experience, that can be a very useful starting point. But of course, there are others. We could start with pilot testing a succession or talent program in a department or a company division where we have or expect a lot of problems, a lot of retirements, we have higher turnover, or they are strategically critical, like in a manufacturing firm, the engineering division is critical. And we may have special problems with engineers that we don't have with other workers. So we may want to start with the engineering division if it has special needs and we have special problems with that group. Number 5, given the new normal, what are some current trends? Well, one of the trends is to start to think of those agile workforce methods.
Mhm.
And there's something called talent pools. A talent pool is a group of people that we are systematically developing for promotion.
Mhm.
And that's the way we have traditionally thought of a talent pool.
Mhm.
But today, a lot of companies are looking at external talent pools.
Right, right.
They're trying to identify people outside the company that they could hire quickly if they lost someone in their company.
Mm.
And they could look at special groups like vendors, like suppliers, like distributors, like competitors, like other organizations that we are familiar with their people. We may want to develop short lists of backups,
Mm.
talent pools for every critical position in our company,
Right.
so that we have a short list of people and we don't have to think it out in an emergency as a result of the virus causing someone to die or to be in the hospital for a long time. And so external talent pooling is a trend. Thinking about agile workforces is a trend.
Yeah.
What do I think some of the future trends in talent management will be? I just listed a few, and this thinking about agile workforces. How do we get the work done? And it's not just with full-time workers. We're moving away from the old idea of a job being 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year. We are starting to think about all jobs as gig economy jobs. So we hire people for a project.
Okay.
And when the project is over with, they're done.
Yes.
Mhm.
And then we look for people to do the next project.
Mhm.
We have many projects going on in our company. And some people are working on multiple projects, and other people are let go because they have no projects.
Mhm.
They're paying for results rather than paying for time.
Mhm.
So that's a trend I believe we will see. And of course, we have all heard about artificial intelligence and
Right.
robots
Yes.
and what their likely impact will be. There are some very depressing statistics about the percentage of the world's workforce that may be unemployed as a result of artificial intelligence
Sure.
and robots. Of course, another trend that's come about as a result of the virus is a lot more remote workers.
Mhm. True.
True.
And one study said that 56% of all jobs in the US could be done from home.
Mhm.
And right now, 20% of all jobs are done from home.
Mhm.
So there is clearly a movement toward people working out of their homes to,
Yes.
and even children studying for school out of the home.
Yes. That's now happening also here in Manila now.
So I heard that trend pointed out 20 years ago in Dubai, where the Minister of Education gave a talk that I attended. And he said that the national goal in Dubai was to move away from brick and mortar schools and have all children learning online. And at the time, I thought that doesn't make sense. How can we have a first grader studying online? They don't have the self-discipline to sit at a keyboard and look at a screen
Yes.
for a long period of time. But if their father or mother is sitting right next to them, yes, they will focus, but that has implications for the workforce.
Yes.
Can we afford to have the mother or the father sitting there making sure that their child is paying attention to schoolwork? I don't know. So what unique talent management practices does the US have that other countries might learn from? I think this idea of the agile workforce is an approach that multinational companies have been using for some time. They've shrunk their workforces, but they have never been more profitable or productive than they are today. They've done that by reducing labor costs, but finding very clever ways to get the work accomplished. So I think that's a unique trend. I think another area is spending more time and effort looking at these new dimensions of knowledge transfer and social relationship transfer that has been traditionally overlooked in succession and talent programs. Another area is pushing talent management into daily work. How do we get managers to take responsibility for growing talent every day? And most managers don't know how to do it.
Exactly.
That's
They
the challenge.
think that it's always the job of HR. Wherein as managers or as heads of departments, they also have a job to do in terms of developing their own people.
If a manager wants to do this, dump it off on HR. That's not practical.
It's the problem of HR. They would always say that.
So this is one of the questions that I ask a CEO when I come in to be a consultant for the company is, what are you willing to do to make sure that managers groom their successors?
Wow, that's a challenge.
And are you willing to pay for it? And I've had CEOs who went to the board of directors and got permission to change the bonus plan of the company, put heavy weight on developing talent as a key component in the executive bonus plan. And the difference between before and after is dramatic, because the managers all know how to meet their daily numbers and their yearly targets, but sometimes they don't know how to groom their talent.
Yeah.
So suddenly they will get very interested in that when they are being paid for it.
Yeah.
So my philosophy is you get what you pay for. And if you're unwilling to pay, then you are not really committed.
Yeah, that's true.
No commitment. And I don't want to work with clients that have no commitment.
Yes.
Because it will ruin my reputation. It will look like I don't know how to help them install a talent or succession program. But it's ultimately their fault if they will not reward people. In government, it's a little different. Generally, in democracies like the US and the Philippines, the public do not want government managers to get bonuses. So that looks like a payoff. That looks like bribery to the public. So we have to find other ways in government to deal with incenting managers. And the way we usually do that is with a talent scorecard.
Yes.
And you submit your talent scorecard with your budget. And then the legislative body In the US, that would be Congress, looks at the performance of each manager in developing their talent, and they ask difficult questions if the scorecard is bad. And it might lead to firing that government manager. So that's one way to deal with, I think, some unique talent practices.
Okay. Wow.
So the last one, any thoughts on people management that HR practitioners have to study or be more familiar with? Yes, I think there are several.
Yes.
And two that I would point to. The first one is that I am hearing a lot of complaints from employers that recent college graduates have very bad interpersonal skills.
Whoa. Even there in the US?
Oh, yes. And that's and it's understandable because young people have learned how to use this technology wonderfully,
Right.
but they don't know how to work with people in direct relationships. And I have a picture that describes all of this. It shows a circle of young people sitting together, and they all have their cell phones, and they are texting each other. And they're sitting there face to face. The point I'm making is interpersonal skills. And you can go to the web, you can see a lot of definitions of different interpersonal skills, but things like using appropriate body language, knowing how to talk to people, knowing how to introduce yourself, knowing how to make conversation. These are all critical.
Right.
And unfortunately, it's a deficiency with many recent graduates.
What do you normally advise them, Dr. Bill, since you're also teaching in college? What do you advise the students who are having difficult time with regard to their interpersonal skills?
Well, we've had PhD dissertations where my students have studied exactly what that employer complaint means. In other words, when you say there's a problem with interpersonal skills, that's vague. We don't know exactly what the problem is. So we have to pin it down and get very clear before we can train people, before we can coach people, before we can mentor people. We have to know exactly what the problem is so that we can solve it. So that's a first step, getting clear on what the deficiency is, and then we can come up with ways to solve the problem.
Okay.
So that's one approach. And the other thing that I would point to as a trend of the future for HR people are those interpersonal skills move to distance and remote work.
Yes, yes.
So how do we build a corporate culture when we are all working online?
Yes, that would be interesting.
How do we build personal relationships when we are all working online? And we lose some of the body language, some of the personal relationship when we are not interacting face to face.
True.
So if we have a meeting in a central office, we can go to lunch with people and talk about many things, not just the work.
Yes.
But if we work together through remote methods, it tends to be very focused.
True.
So one of the trends is to start to try to build in social time, non-work meetings, where we just have fun and we interact online, but we do it without a job task in mind.
Mhm.
And so some companies are starting to require their managers to have weekly meetings where they don't talk about work, they talk about each other.
Wow.
Wow. Probably some karaoke time as well.
That's a good intervention to have. That's
Yes.
something that should be incorporated in the corporate culture.
Well, we know there have been many books written on how to have fun in the workplace.
Right.
Mhm.
And we can move those from face-to-face efforts to remote efforts. How do we have fun working together when we're all working remotely?
True.
And that's an area to think about because the nature of our relationship affects our productivity.
True.
Right.
I agree. Especially
So,
Filipinos.
yes, that's right.
Teachers.
You have a relationship culture in the US. We don't think we do, but still relationships do matter.
Yes.
Emotional intelligence is still critical to getting good work results. So we have to, that's what my field of organization development is all about, is building those relationships and building emotional intelligence.
Well, we love this
My
book.
favorite book. I have to wait for 2 weeks just to have this.
Yeah, because it's
Yes.
not readily available.
In the Philippines, I have to order it in the bookstore.
Terrible, terrible. Nakaka Ines.
I know that! Good Filipino shooter!
Including the accent, the kakainis.
So you see that I do know some Tagalog.
Yeah. By the way, any plans of going back to Manila in a few weeks or in a few months or a year?
Not in the immediate future because of the virus.
Yes.
Did you know that there are 33 countries
Mhm.
that bar US citizens from coming?
Really?
33 countries because of the prevalence of the virus in the US. So I have a 10-year multi-entry visa to China.
Mhm.
And I can't go because China has barred entry to US citizens
Oh.
because of the virus.
Probably Manila is a better place to go.
Well, my wife has talked about us retiring in the Philippines. We could live like kings in the Philippines.
You will
You better think about it.
you will be able to live in a farm, probably plant mangoes,
Yeah.
some vegetables.
No,
Life.
I want a big mansion with gates and all that sort of thing.
Oh. You can do that here, Dr. Bill.
Yes, that's right.
If that happens, you'll be closer to where we're staying because we're already at the northernmost part of Quezon City. The next is Bulacan already.
Okay, that's good.
Dr.
Well,
Bill,
you know, the wife went to school in Quezon City.
oh,
She went to nursing school there.
mm.
So I've been there many times.
Yes, I remember. Before you were coming, at least so once every 6 months or once every year.
Yes, well, not now. I haven't been anywhere internationally. I flew back on March the 7th
Mm.
from Myanmar.
Mm.
I was in Myanmar doing a big session with ITD,
Mhm.
and I flew back on March the 7th, and I have not left the US since.
Mhm.
We have not even been able to visit our home in Florida.
Oh, really? Even interstate travel is modulated.
And some states now will not allow entry from other states
Oh,
in the
really?
US. Yeah.
Oh.
They will make you self-quarantine for 14 days. Yeah. Yeah. So it's really terrible.
Hmm.
Actually, I have a different question for Dr. Bill, if I may.
Okay.
Not related to what you've discussed. Something
Okay.
about you. I wanted to know, Dr. Bill, if I may ask you, what kept your interest with the subject of organization development and succession planning? Because I'm also an HR and OD enthusiast. I'm an advocate, and I am very much interested with all your work. I highly admire it, but I just wanted to know what kept you so motivated, so passionate about the study of org development, the science behind it.
Oh. Well, I got interested in organization development many years ago because I entered the HR field as a specialist in training and development.
Mm.
And I quickly saw that many of the problems that companies try to solve through training are actually problems with the corporate culture or the system.
Right.
So training and development will only solve problems with individual people that results from the lack of knowledge, the lack of skill, or the right attitude.
Mm.
So training is a change effort, but it changes one person at a time by giving them new knowledge, skill, and attitude. But what about the whole organization, the whole team, the whole department, the whole division? Well, we know you cannot change corporate culture with training alone.
Right.
True.
You need to do other things in addition to training. Training is part of it, but it's only part of it. So that bigger picture is OD.
Right.
Yes.
That's where organization development comes in. It gives you the tools, the approaches, the methods by which to change the environment surrounding the person.
Mhm.
So training changes the person, OD changes the group and the corporate culture. So we need both if we want to bring about lasting, sustainable change. So that's what got me interested in it. I kept hearing from people in my training courses, well, I shouldn't be here. My boss should be here.
True. Even here in Manila, experience that. It's not me who should be here. You should have started with my boss.
Yes.
Well, and what they're really saying is that it is a system problem, the company problem, rather than a problem with the individual. So that's what originally got me interested in organization development. But I've also been interested in performance consulting, which to me is the opposite of OD. There are two ends to that continuum. On one end, we have expert-driven change, where you ask the experts, and based on their knowledge, they act like medical doctors. You go to the doctor diagnoses what's wrong with you, and then gives you the right medicine.
Right.
Well, in the HR field, we call that approach performance consulting.
Yes.
Or human performance improvement. They're the same thing. And I've written many books on that topic. Then we go to the other end of the continuum, away from expert consulting. We say, well, what do the people believe the problems are? What do the people believe the priority in solving those problems should be? What do the workers believe should be the solutions? What do the workers believe the action plans for implementing the solutions should be? That's OD.
Mhm.
When we start to involve all the key stakeholders
Yeah.
solving problems or building strengths. So to me, they're tools in a golf club bag that I carry around to help my corporate clients and my government managers who face problems.
Mhm.
How do we solve those? And there's more than one approach. OD is one approach.
Mhm.
It's a flavor of change management.
My last question would be, what would be your advice, your message to HR practitioners, OD, or learning and development practitioners to become more effective in what they do? Or advice as well to those people who would like to follow your footsteps?
Yeah.
Well, one of the areas that I have become interested in over the years is company politics.
Mhm.
And I believe that that is a serious weakness that I have.
Right.
I think that is a serious weakness in HR
Agree.
practitioners generally.
Right.
Yes.
Right. True.
How do we get people to listen to us?
True.
And that to me is one of the pieces of advice that I would have, is to find a political mentor, someone or a group of people who are really good at organizational politics, and try to learn from them practical strategies to get your ideas heard so that you can be influential. If people don't listen to you, you cannot be helpful.
True.
So I would say that an area for future work, a lot of HR people are really technical people.
Right.
They have knowledge about how to do things like develop pay structures or develop a training program. Those are really technical skills.
Yes.
Right.
What they're lacking is the necessary political skill.
Agree. I 100% agree to that.
To have an impact beyond their department. So, and there are many reasons for this, and I think we have to, if we're not good at politics, we need to find people who are and learn from them through mentoring relationships, and thereby build our own skills in politics. So that's the area that I would point to. There has been some work done on company politics. I've looked for it. It's hard to find the practical stuff.
Yes.
Probably the most famous people who have written on it is March and Simon, and their work is old, 1960s, 70s vintage.
Whoa. It's more than 50 years old.
It's very practical even today. Like they said, for example, they gave a top 10 list of tips to win political fights. One of their tips was, in a meeting, refuse to surrender your position. Keep pushing the same idea forever. And eventually people will get tired and they will give in and they let you do what you want.
Oh.
Of course, you will make a lot of enemies because people don't like to hear people who keep nagging and complaining about the same thing, but you will win your political fight. So that's the kind of practical advice that I'm talking about. Where do we get that from? So some people are good at politics just naturally, and other people learn those political skills from their own bosses over time, seeing how their bosses interacted to get what they wanted or needed for their departments. So I think that's an area that I would encourage people to work on.
Wow.
Very interesting study. In fact, I have to agree with Dr. Bill that there's no recent study in terms of politics in the corporate world.
Yeah,
for a book on that one too.
In the newest edition of Practicing OD, I insisted on a chapter on company politics. And we had a lot of trouble finding someone who could write a practical chapter on that. We got theories, yeah, and I didn't want those. I wanted the tips. What should you do? So we did find someone who could write that, but it's a very short chapter. That's an area for future investigation and future.
Wow, we learned so much
Wow.
from the
Really, the time
guru of HR, OD.
It was really a pleasure having you. We're thankful that you agreed to join us today, and we look forward to having more discussions with you.
Okay.
Time permits.
Well, send me a link. Are you going to post this on YouTube or something? Is that what you do? Well, I blast out to my social media networks. You've probably seen some of my postings. I'm doing a lot of social media. So if I have links to those, I will shoot them out to 500,000 people.
Yes,
okay.
We will.
We will send it to you.
We will send it to you. Thank you, Dr. Bill. It was a pleasure having
Very
you.
enriching discussion with you, with the guru.
Okay, thank you.
Being with you again. Thank you, Dr. Bill. Have a good day.
Thank you, Dr. Bill.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.